Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the early movement of our Strasburg clock. The music we hear is Dawn Mantras by the Australian composer Ross Edwards and was specially selected for the playing at this clock. Our clock is a model. It's modelled from a clock which today stands in Strasburg Cathedral in France. And this model was built here in Sydney in 1889 by a Sydney clockmaker Richard Smith. And in 1890 the New South Wales government purchased the clock from him for this museum. The clock has many movements. First and foremost, it does tell the time. And the numerous dials indicate the astronomical movements which take place throughout each day. The first movement to occur tells a story. It's a story selected from the Christian Bible. The story is that of Peter's denial of Christ. And at 5 minutes to each hour, this will take place on the top balcony where the central door will open and a figure of Christ will appear in the doorway. This will then be followed by a procession of the 12 apostles. They will appear from the right. As each apostle approaches Christ, he will turn to him and bow his head. Christ in return will bless each apostle. First apostle to appear is Andrew. As the sixth apostle appears, the little window to the left of the doorway will open and a figure of Satan will appear, the sixth apostle being Peter. As Peter approaches Christ, he will turn his back towards him, denying him, and at that moment the rooster on the tower will flap its wings and crow 3 times for the denial. The procession continues till the final apostle Judas with his bag of silver. On his arrival, once again, Satan appears in the window. On his departure, the figure of Christ withdraws and the doors then close. Judas departs, the figure of Christ withdraws, and the doors then close. On the balcony below, where now stands a small figure. The figure should be an old man, but there's a little mix-up somewhere. On the hour, the skeleton in the background on that balcony strikes the death knell of the hour, and the old man takes the old hour with him. The new hour is then heralded in by the arrival of a newborn child. 1:15 the hour, the child is replaced by a youth. 1:30 the hour, the youth by a warrior. 1:15 to the next hour, once again our old man should return to complete the hour, and this shows the 4 stages of life and the passage of time. The old man has now turned up. In the half circle we get the daily phasings of the moon, and we also get the tidal movements each day. Moon is indicated by the sphere at the moment. It's showing most silver, telling us we're on a full moon, or just about on a full moon at the moment. And the silver strip that passes across the base represents the tide. That silver strip rises and falls each day in accordance with the tidal movements in the Sydney area. The dial below is an orrery, and the orreries give us the daily movements of the planets around the Sun, the central figure being the Sun. The closest planet to the Sun is Mercury. It takes Mercury 88 days to make its cycle of the Sun and the dial. Venus, the next out, takes 225 days to do the same. The third planet out is Mother Earth, and we all know it takes 365 days to make its cycle of the Sun and the dial. And the other planets vary in time. The one at the extreme outside towards the base is Neptune, and it takes Neptune 165 years to make its cycle around the Sun and also around our dial. Of the 9 known planets, we only have 8 on our orrery. The one missing is Pluto. Pluto wasn't discovered until 1930, and that was some 40 odd years after our clock had been built. The markings around the perimeter show the 12 signs of the zodiac. The dial below shows Eastern Standard Time, and it remains at all times Eastern Standard. It is never altered for the daylight savings periods. Little cherubs on either side, each quarter hour, one strikes a gong and the other turns an hourglass. Little chariot on view, just below. There are 7 chariots, each representing a day of the week, each chariot driven by one of the ancient Roman gods or goddesses, and today being Friday, we have Venus on view. The dial below is a grand astronomical clock. It's a 24-hour clock. It tells the time, the date and the month of the year. It also shows us the position in the heavens at this moment of the Sun and the Moon, and the little window across the base. The stars that appear in that window at any given moment are the stars that are immediately above us at that particular time. 6 dials on the left to show pre-zonal times in 6 major cities of the world: London, Edinburgh and Dublin, Berlin, St. Petersburg and New York. Zonal time came to Europe in 1887 and into Australia in 1895. 3 sliding scales to the right. The little one on the left is the sun cycle, a 28-year cycle of our calendars. Each year's calendar, day for date, definitely repeats itself every 28 years. One on the right is the cycles of the moon. Between each new moon it takes 29.5 days, and it takes the moon 19 years to complete a cycle. The dates on which each new moon fall this year will repeat themselves in 19 years' time. And the central dial gives us solar mean time. It gives us the position each day of the Sun at midday by our clocks. There are only 4 days each year that the Sun is immediately north on our meridian at 12 noon. For the rest of the year it varies, anything up to 15 minutes fast or 16 minutes slow. So much for the mechanics of our clock. Our clock is modelled from the clock in Strasburg. The tower on the left, the paintings on that tower are identical with the paintings on the cathedral clock. The top one is Urania, goddess of astronomers. The central figure, Nicholas Copernicus, the famous Polish astronomer, the man who determined the fact that the Sun is the centre of the universe, not Earth. And the gentleman at the base is Jean-Baptiste Schwelge, the French engineer who supervised the reconstruction of the clock which stands in Strasbourg. The two lines on the base show the coat of arms of the city of Strasbourg. The clock in the cathedral is rather large. It is set in stone. It is actually built into the cathedral itself. The first clock was built in the 14th century and it was replaced in the 16th century. Towards the end of the 18th century, somewhere around the time of the French Revolution, the clock stopped and it remained stopped for the next 50 odd years. In the 1830s, the job was given to Mr. Schwilde to try and get it going once again, but it was beyond repair, and restoration was commenced in 1838 and was completed in 1942. And we're pleased to say the clock still ticks in the cathedral today. Our clock, as I said, is a model, and it's modelled in Sydney by a Sydney clockmaker named Richard Bartholomew Smith. And he built this clock in a room above his father's fruit shop up in Oxford Street, Darlinghurst, just a few doors along from Hyde Park. He was 25 years of age when he built the clock, and he never saw the clock which stands in the cathedral. At 25, he wanted to build something to commemorate 100 years of white settlement in Australia, hence his centennial clock. He did see a postcard of the cathedral clock which took his fancy. He visited the libraries of Sydney for the technical information he required, and he commenced building in 1887 and he completed it in 1889. In 1890, the New South Wales government purchased the clock from him with a handsome sum of £700. The cost to build the clock, according to Mr. Smith, was something like £4,000. After it was purchased, it was first housed in a temporary building at the rear of Sydney Hospital for a couple of years. In 1893, with the opening of the new Museum of Applied Arts and Science along the road here in Harris Street, the clock was transferred across to it. And during its time there, the management retained the services of Mr. Smith to maintain the clock and also to give talks about it. And this he did of a Saturday and Sunday afternoon. In 1942, he passed away at the age of 80. The clock remained in the old museum for the next 40 odd years, during which time it was known to have worked on occasions. And finally in 1980 it was taken out of service. At that time they were preparing to close the old museum down in preparation to move into this building. And whilst out of service, this restoration was carried out on the clock. And with the opening of this building in 1988, our clock was back on display, but it didn't start working again until the 27th of January 1989, when Sir David Martin, the Governor of New South Wales, started the clock going once again on its 100th birthday. The clock ticked away nicely through the 1990s, and right up to the new millennium it started to show its age, and in 2002 it was taken out of service for further restoration. Much of the equipment that Mr. Smith had made were removed from the clock, and some of it is on display in the cabinet alongside here today. And the clock currently works on an electric motor, with 3 exceptions. The hourly movement of the apostles, the hourly movement of the rooster on the tower, and the daily movement of the chariot, they have to be hand wound each day. And that completes our talk on the Strasburg clock. Any questions? I shall endeavour to answer them. Thank you very much. Thank you.